What's going on, Godzirra Nation? This is Arghgodzirra. We are back with some more Arghgodzirra'S footy tipping competition. We are looking forward to AFL Round 11 action. Thank you for joining me, as always. Big round of football just finished with the inaugural Indigenous round, and an even bigger weekend in some retrospects coming up this weekend. The weekend before we get into the bye structure, which sees certain teams not play each week. Very limited in the teams that do play. But let's not worry about that just yet, ladies and gentlemen. Let's focus on the week ahead, which kicks off Friday night at Marvel Stadium between North Melbourne and Richmond. Both teams coming off of a win last weekend. Richmond, however, stringing 3 together quite impressively. North Melbourne last week getting the better of the Bulldogs. This week, however, I'm still backing my boys to get it done. They are very short odds with Bet Easy to get the job done, and I think they will get it done quite comfortably. Trent Cotchin, the captain, is rumoured to be coming back into the side this weekend. Tom Lynch, with that corky injury that he got last week, is supposed to be shaking that off and A-OK as well. We get Ivan Soldo back in the ruck. Even though I thought Coleman Jones did a pretty good job last week on debut, it'd be good to have a senior head in the form of Soldo, who's got a little bit more experience coming back in. Back against the wall, though, North Melbourne could prove a big upset here against Richmond. However, for me, quite comfortably, the Tigers get it done Friday night. Kicking off Saturday afternoon, we have Collingwood taking on Fremantle at the MCG. Fremantle last week in a thriller, hitting the post after the siren to beat Brisbane by 1 point after a deadlock game. Collingwood just continuing to do Collingwood things, and they're going to get it done quite comfortably against Fremantle Saturday afternoon. I don't see how they're going to have an answer for the likes of Brodie Grundy in the ruck. He's going to have another huge game. Adam Treloar is going to get off the chain. Scott Pendlebury has been nothing but impressive this season, and even with some of the outs they do have, I still feel they're going to get this done quite comfortably. 30, 40 odd points I feel in the way of the Pies to kick off Saturday afternoon. We head on over then to Giant Stadium, where GWS take on the Gold Coast Suns. And it's as simple as this: GWS get it done. Last week, very impressive to watch GWS go about their business again, especially after the week they had before with Hawthorn. I knew they'd bounce back, but this weekend, this is the true test. This is where they lock in their top 4 spot. This is where they get a big percentage boost. This is where they have to put Gold Coast away by 10 plus goals. To me, that'll make a big firm statement that GWS have well and truly bounced back from the hiding they copped from Hawthorn and continue their year on strong. GWS for me at Giant Stadium. GMHBA plays host to possibly one of the games of the round. Geelong hosting Sydney. Geelong doing Geelong things. We have seen Geelong this year, the most impressive team I feel by far in the competition at this point in time. Outright premiership favourites, and they deserve to be. Sydney last week dropping the ball against Collingwood in a very close game. However, I thought they fought valiantly. They'd won a couple prior to that, but I think this weekend Geelong are just going to prove too strong at GMHBA Stadium for myself. However, that being said, the Reapers' scythe has swung early this week. For those of you who haven't been tuning in the last couple of weeks, it is now time for a segment that we like to call the Touch of Death. So how the Touch of Death works, based on previous weeks, is the Grim Reaper comes in and will select one team that they feel is going to cause a big upset for that given weekend. He arrived in round 9 and he tipped the Bulldogs to beat Geelong. For a very long time in that game I thought it was going to happen, but Geelong got out by a huge margin in the end. Last week, the Reaper swung at St Kilda, backing Carlton to get it done. In the first quarter, I actually thought the Reaper was done and dusted and Carlton was going to sink it, but we saw how St Kilda fought back and managed to get that win. This week, however, they have touched Geelong. They are marked for death, and Sydney Swans have been selected by the Reaper to get up and beat Geelong at GMHBA. Just to roll off some stats for you, Geelong hasn't beaten Sydney at home since round 19, 2015. Their average losing margin is 30 points, and with a near close win at home last week against the Pies, and both grounds similar in size, GMHBA and SCG that is, with some noticeable outs for both clubs. We don't know whether Dangerfield's going to come back in. You know, Josh Kennedy has that injury that's floating about, so both teams a little bit worrying with injuries on both sides. The Reaper feels the Swans is going to win this one in a very close contest. Hasn't decided to give a margin this week, but feels Sydney is going to be good enough to knock off Geelong and deliver one of very limited losses that I feel they're going to get this season. Let me know in the comments below if you think the Reaper this week is on the money. But moving on from that game, we still have a handful to go for the weekend. Kicking off Saturday night at the Gabba, we have the Brisbane Lions hosting Hawthorn in what is going to be another potential game of the round for myself. Very close contest between these two, I feel. Brisbane last week, we know, came off a 1-point loss to Fremantle after the siren. Hawthorn doing a number on Port Adelaide, and I actually thought Port Adelaide was going to get it done against Hawthorn. For myself here, I'm going to back Brisbane purely because for the most part this year, they have defended the Gabba pretty strong, and I feel, unlike Port Adelaide last week, not being able to keep up with the run of Hawthorn, I think the Brisbane youngsters can take it to Hawthorn in that respect. So I think it's going to be a very fast-paced game for both teams. That being said, Brisbane slightly get the job done over Hawks this weekend and continue to further press their finals campaign for 2019. And Saturday night rounds out TIO Stadium, Melbourne, Adelaide. Both teams coming off of back-to-back losses from previous weeks. Melbourne going down to the West Coast in round 9 and then getting done by GWS last week. And having a look at the Adelaide Crows, they are coming off of losses to both Brisbane by a point, and then last week falling short of the money against West Coast Eagles. So both teams coming into this game have a lot at stake here. I feel, however, Adelaide are getting over the line. It hurts me to say it because I tipped Melbourne in my predictions video at the start of the year to finish on top of the ladder and feature in the grand final. That is not the case. I don't know what has happened at Melbourne this season to have such a drastic drop, but Adelaide now, even though they have lost 2 close weeks of football, they're definitely still running with a head of momentum, and I feel they are going to get the job done quite comfortably here against Melbourne. However, with that being said, Melbourne have the chance here to prove the AFL world wrong, and they do have a tendency, when their backs are against the wall and nobody gives them a chance, to absolutely come out and romp the opposition. However, I don't feel that's the case this weekend. Saturday night for me rounds out with Adelaide coming out on top. Sunday sees 3 games of football kicking off in China. Pretty sure that's Jiangwan. I apologise if we've got that wrong. But we've got St Kilda hosting Port Adelaide. Both teams kind of wavering around, 11th, 10th spot, pushing for a potential finals placement this year, and both I feel are still within touch of finishing within that top 8. Last week St Kilda got it done against Carlton. Port Adelaide obviously dropping the ball against Hawthorn. Both teams have shown a lot this year to warrant being selected this week, and I feel both teams are actually overperforming to where people thought they were going to finish this year as well. For myself, I just feel like Port Adelaide are going to get it done, but St Kilda last week, what I saw against Carlton, they had the same running game that Hawthorn implemented against Port Adelaide and absolutely killed them. If players like Jade Gresham, Shane Savage get off the chain and get run moving early, they can really put Port Adelaide to the sword. I just feel this week Port Adelaide bounce back after getting pantsed by Hawthorn and get the job done to kick off Sunday afternoon. Later that afternoon at the MCG, Essendon host Carlton in what really needs to be a must-win game for both clubs, because I feel both coaches, Woosha and Bolton, they're both running the risk now of the fact that Brad Scott has obviously lost his job at North Melbourne. It's now going to start a domino effect, I feel, with coaches that don't live up to expectation. Essendon showed enough last week against Richmond for me to back Essendon this week. However, Carlton could come out and absolutely romp them here. I really don't know who I'm going to pick. You know what? I'm going on a limb. I'm giving him a chance. I'm going with Carlton this weekend to knock off Essendon. You've got to take chances sometimes when it comes to footy competitions, guys. And even though Essendon come into this game huge favourite, I feel if Carlton get an early enough jump, they can get the job done and notch up a much-needed win for their season. They've taken it to clubs early like Collingwood. They took it to Richmond in the first game. Clubs like that, if they can keep up with them, I feel they can get it done comfortably against Essendon. Carlton for me at the MCG. And to round out Sunday, we have Eagles hosting the Bulldogs at Optus Stadium. The biggest story to come out of this weekend is the mid-season draft only happened a couple of days ago, and the Bulldog, Ryan Gardner, that was drafted from Footscray to the Doggies, has already been told he is going to debut for the club this weekend. I think that's absolutely huge for the kid. I give full raps to the Bulldogs. They might have been forced to play him a little bit early because of injuries at the club, but I think it's great to see the young kid already getting a chance. That being said, I'm really not giving the Bulldogs any chance in this game, and I think the Eagles are going to win quite comfortably. You cannot deny when the Eagles play at home, they are one of the most dominant teams in the AFL, and they are going to show why this weekend. Eagles for me to round out round 11 quite comfortably. So to look back at my tips for the weekend, we have gone with Richmond, Collingwood, GWS, Geelong, Brisbane, Adelaide, Port Adelaide, Carlton, and West Coast Eagles. Be sure to leave your tips in the comment section down below if you have been following this footy tipping competition. On a side note, if you have been in this competition since the beginning, but you've dropped off with getting comments in on time the previous weeks, what I have been doing is defaulting the away teams to your selections, just like actual footy tipping competitions would work. I know there's a couple of you the last couple of weeks that haven't been able to get your comments in, or whether you've been hitting me up on social media through messaging to get your tips to myself. Don't worry, you haven't fallen behind the bar. Some of you have actually had some pretty good weeks, because there have been some weeks where the away teams have been dominant. So don't worry about that. The Google document will be available, so stay tuned for that as well. I've been trying to get my head around how to put it together and chase up all the comments, especially the fact that I'm getting social media comments as well. So I apologise it's taken so long, but I can tell you the competition is up for grabs for anybody. There's been some big movement the last couple of weeks, and you'll be surprised with how the ladder is shaping up as we speak. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for joining me for another installment of AFL Footy Tipping. I cannot thank you guys enough for getting behind this initiative. Leave a like on the video if you can. It goes a long way to supporting myself, and I seriously cannot thank you guys enough for that support. If you're new to the channel, plenty of gameplays to check out. I urge you to do so, and if you enjoy what I'm throwing down, you can get on board the Godzirra Nation by hitting subscribe. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. Good luck to your teams this weekend, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.